I was so resistant. A lot of the stories I created as a result of that were that my mom just did whatever she wanted, that my voice didn't matter. It felt oftentimes like just as I was getting settled, just as I was making friends, finding some sense of belonging, it was time to move again. And so I had this feeling growing up all through high school and college and into adulthood that I was sort of the outsider, that I didn't really belong anywhere. And so I was very resistant to the idea of moving. And all I really longed for was a sense of home, a sense of belonging.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. Today I'm here with Carissa Karban, and she is a shadow alchemist. And what I mean by that is that she really teaches about reframing our darkest moments into what sets us free. And she's also a co founder of 2 startups while being a nomadic traveler. It's such an honor to have you on today, Carissa.
Thanks, Aneta, for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Absolutely. So you have such an interesting journey of being a nomadic traveler, founder of startups, and just really learning how to reframe and rewrite your story. So can you give us a little bit of a background on what life was like for you growing up and how that has shaped your perspective to who you are today?
Yeah. Wow. Such a great question out of the gate. So I was raised by a single parent. I'm an only child. So my mom and I really had what I've now come to say is see as like an enmeshed relationship. We were really just the two of us. So there have been a lot of codependent patterns that shaped who I am and things that I've gotten to create awareness around, breakthrough in terms of old behavioral patterns, things like that. But I did move around a lot growing up. So I think that was maybe setting an early stage for being able to be on the road, to travel nomadically and be okay. I didn't grow up in just one house. So that was a bit about kind of the logistics of how I grew up. And, it was really interesting. I always longed to have what I would call the American dream, right? The white picket fence. Early on, I created this story in my head that my mom was quote unquote doing it wrong, because I saw her struggling as a single parent. She would frequently have 2, sometimes 3 jobs, really trying to make ends meet. And so looking at her example and the world outside, kind of taking in those societal messages, I was like, oh, the reason we're struggling is because my mom doesn't have the corporate 9 to 5. She's not married. We don't have the stable home. So that's the reason why we're struggling. So a lot of what fueled my early adult decisions in terms of what I majored in college and what I was seeking in terms of a marriage or a relationship were really shaped by this idea of, well, I'm going to do it right. I see my mom doing it wrong. And so I'm going to go check all those boxes because that's the surefire path to success and happiness. And so it was as I started checking those boxes that I realized that inside I really still wasn't happy or fulfilled. And in my mid-20s, I said, wait a second, something's got to give here. And that's what really kind of opened my eyes to the idea that maybe it's not all the messages outside of me that have the answers. Maybe it's something inside of me that will create my happiness. And so that started this very long journey that's been 15 years and going. For really listening to my intuition, healing a lot of my internal wounds, and figuring out who I am and what I want, free of societal conditioning.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really valuable of you to share your story with us. Would you say would be like the biggest block for you when it came to your mindset and unlearning those habits? Because I think a lot of times as we're growing up, we always think, I need to learn more. I need to go to school and learn this, get this certification. But what if it's really about unlearning a lot of things and reframing your mindset? So, what are some of those big blocks that you had to unlearn in your mindset?
Yeah, such a great way to frame that. The unlearning. I'm a huge fan of unlearning. I think for me, a lot of what helped some of my blocks, I guess the block itself was wanting to be right. That sort of egoic construct of identity and this idea that the thoughts in my head are real and I need to listen to them. They are all true. And so I think that was kind of the block. And the way that I moved through that block was studying evolutionary biology, neuroscience, really understanding that our brains are wired to keep us safe. Our egoic brain and our mind really wants us to be in a safe, predictable environment. And so, what we're doing, and many of us know this now, but what we're doing is we're taking in all of this information from outside of us, we're parsing through it, and we're trying to make sense of all of it through the lens of those programs, those patterns that we learned growing up. And so, it's sort of the way I like to say it, and I'm not alone in saying this, but it's like the glasses that we're wearing, the lens through which we view the world. You know, you've
Mhm.
got things like confirmation bias. That's a huge one. We parse in that information and we sort of dismiss anything that might challenge us, that might make us think that we're wrong because we want to be right. And it was a lot of self judgment that came in where I was like, oh, to your point, I need to be doing more. I need to learn more. I need to be smarter. And it was really because as a child, I felt ill equipped to be able to handle the world, handle the responsibilities that were put on my shoulders. So I adopted this lens, these glasses, that I needed to be doing more. I wasn't enough just as I was. And so everything I filtered in sort of confirmed that. I created relationships, experiences, jobs that were all satisfying the idea of making me right, even though it was also making me very unhappy and felt like I was never going to arrive where I wanted to be.
Yeah, that's so true. I can totally relate with you in some aspects because when I was growing up, I grew up in a family that came from another country. So I grew up in Chicago, but my parents came from Poland. So everything was completely opposite for me. I remember I learned English when I went to school. And when I was going to school, like most kids would make fun of me, or that I didn't know this word, or I wasn't talking the way that they were. So I always felt like, what am I doing wrong? And it's just like I always wanted to learn as much as I can, but those were actually just limiting beliefs that were trying to stop me from being who I am. You know, our greatest gift is being yourself and being unique. So it's really learning to embrace that. When it came to you moving a lot when you were younger, how did that shape your mindset? Did you feel like, oh, this is fun? Or did you feel like, why do we have to move again?
I hated it. Oh my gosh. I was so resistant. You know, a lot of the stories I created as a result of that were that my mom just did whatever she wanted, that my voice didn't matter. You know, it felt oftentimes like just as I was getting settled, just as I was making friends, finding some sense of belonging, it was time to move again. And so I had this feeling growing up all through high school and college and into adulthood that I was sort of the outsider, that I didn't really belong anywhere. And so I was very resistant to the idea of moving. And all I really longed for was a sense of home, a sense of belonging, a sense of stability and security. And, you know, it really shaped my mindset. But just as you mentioned, right, kind of that shadow alchemy, it really turns out that that sense of home, that sense of security and stability, it's not that I needed to let go of that. I just needed to reframe what that looked like. Because now, as a nomadic traveler by choice, I carry that sense of home everywhere I go because my home is not a geography, it's not a structure around me. My home is me. It's where I live. And so I think that helped the strong serious discomfort I felt of not belonging, of really craving a sense of home, gave me that energy that I needed to activate into, well, how do I create a sense of home? What does home even mean? Oftentimes we use terms like that and we all have different definitions. We all have different desires when it comes to a sense of safety and home and belonging. And so it forced me to get curious about what that really means to me and what is it that I need? I don't need four walls to call it home. I just need to be grounded and stable within myself and know that my voice matters. And so that really helped me break a lot of the patterns of self abandonment that I adopted growing up as adaptive strategies to help me get through childhood. I abandoned myself in favor of what I thought these new circle of friends would want or think was cool, or what my teachers wanted, or what my mom wanted, or whoever it was. And so it was really about breaking those patterns of self-abandonment helped me create a sense of home in myself wherever I go.
That's so powerful, is creating a sense of home wherever you go. Um, because most people look at a place of home of where they're born or where they grow up. And yes, that may always be home, but that doesn't define home. I grew up in Chicago, and yes, I love Chicago, but I don't consider that home anymore. I did once upon a time, but home is exactly how you just explained it. It's wherever you are, as long as you feel comfortable and grounded wherever you are. Over like the last year, I took the leap of faith and I moved to another country. And I had to learn. I was moving a lot. Like within the first 6 months, like I would move, stay here for a couple of weeks, and then I would move, and then stay here for a couple of weeks, and then move again. And I had to understand that I can't get attached to these physical things, because what's most important is what's inside of me. And if inside of me is not grounded and stable, then nothing else will be. What are some things that you have done on your nomadic journey that have helped you stay grounded and have helped you find your sense of home, no matter where you go?
Such a beautiful question. It's for me, it's kind of two parts. I would say one is I have grounding rituals that I've cultivated as practices. I have a meditation practice, a breathwork practice, a stillness practice when I need it. So I meditate and do breath work every day because that does give me a sense of structure and stability no matter where I am on the road. It's something familiar, something I can come back to. And then I've really cultivated a stillness practice. And what I mean by that is I spent so many years embodied in my masculine energy, constantly going, constantly achieving, accomplishing, on to the next thing. And over the last 5 years or so, I've really intentionally been healing my relationship with my feminine, my softness, to be able to
Mm.
flow, to be in stillness. And something that I learned is, the speed at which our mind works is much faster than the speed at which our body operates. And so cultivating a practice of stillness, if I'm feeling agitated or anxious or overwhelmed by something, I used to think, I just need to solve this problem. I just need to figure it out. So I would continue pushing at the problem. And it usually just made my anxiety worse. And so now I've really cultivated a practice of stillness that no matter where I am, even if I have 1,000 things in my head that I need to get done, if I'm feeling anxious, I really get still. I take the time, I make the time. I don't find the time, I make the time to be in stillness, to get quiet, and to know that I can be patient. This sense of urgency that we run in the world, this tenet of like, there's not enough time scarcity is how we operate. And really, when we slow down and we realize we have everything we need, we have all the time that we need, everything will unfold in divinely perfect timing. So cultivating that practice of stillness, I think, is has been really, really important. And then the second part that came to me as you were asking that question was really that law of non-attachment that you just spoke to. I think that's so powerful, right? We can get so attached to our external circumstances, our relationships, our jobs, and those become the things that define us. They become our identity. And something I'm really, really passionate about studying power dynamics and looking at power over, power under, power with, power to dynamics. And so when I look at what it means to be really empowered, it means not externalizing my power to things outside of me. And so one thing that I mean by that is, let's say I have a white shirt on today. Let's say if I am so identified with how I come across in my wardrobe and what I'm wearing, if I spill coffee or a smoothie or something on my white shirt and I get it dirty, that could ruin my entire day because it has now threatened a part of my identity. Now, it might sound kind of trivial when I say that, we spill something on ourselves, like, come on, Carissa, like that's not really going to threaten our sense of identity, but it absolutely can if we externalize our power to, let's say, how we're perceived by other people based on what we wear, what car we drive, what house we live in, whatever it is. And so I'm sure many of us can relate. I mean, sometimes we just have a bad day, right? It's like one thing after another, and then the coffee spills on the shirt. Of course, we're going to get irritated. That's a perfectly human response. But the idea of getting wrapped up in it for more than a few moments, right? We might feel that agitation. Okay, I need to go change, or that it just is what it is for today, but it's not a huge deal. But if we're constantly wrapped up in, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened, I'm so frustrated by it, and we allow that to kind of balloon and take over our mind for the rest of the day, that's a great example of how we're externalizing our power to something that is ultimately outside of our control. And so when we think about taking our power back, it's about really looking at what is within my control and what is not. And so it's that fine line of action and surrender where I take the action that I'm meant to take. I'm not resigned to whatever happens. I'm just going to let it happen. I take the action that's mine to take, but then I surrender the rest. So that means, Aneta, if you and I are having a difficult conversation, it means I share my truth because that is mine to share. And then I let you have whatever reaction you're going to have. I can't control that. How often do we try to control other people's reactions by what we share, what we don't share? And we're really just externalizing our power to other people. So that's been a huge practice for me being on the road, is taking back my power to know what is within my control and what's not.
Wow, I have so many thoughts on all of that you just said, because there's so many valuable points in there. I had to take notes. You said, you don't take time, you make time. The number one thing I can't stand is when people say, I don't have time. Well, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. I don't know how many hours you have, but I have 24. No, we all have the same 24 hours, and it's about what's important and what are we prioritizing. It's take that time every single day to sit down and just make a list of what's important to you. What do you prioritize versus what you don't? And that's what you'll make time for. So that was really, really well said. And I love that. Another point you were talking about was seeing the good in everything. When you were talking about the example of, oh, spilling your coffee or a smoothie on your shirt, yeah, it might sound minor, but it can actually flip somebody's like their personality upside down for the day. I'm gonna be honest, I used to be that person once upon a time, so I
Me too. Me
completely.
too.
I remember one time I was with a former partner of mine, and we went on a trip, we went on vacation, and we rented a car. Well, we rented a specific car, and they gave us a different one because they rented the car that we wanted to somebody else. I had the biggest fit for at least 24 hours. I literally was forcing myself to get over it after 24 hours, but I was still like just faking a smile the next day, because little things like that of how are people going to see me, what is this person going to think, nobody even knows us in that state or that city, so why does it matter? But it was all an internal thing because I wasn't fully grounded in
Mhm.
who I am. So that was so well said.
Great story. I think that's a great example. Yeah, and it's just so powerful when we start to get curious. we I'm not alone in saying this again, but a lot of people who study like human emotion,
Mhm.
it's absolutely natural for us to have whatever emotion we're going to have in response to a moment or an event. But if we start to have like a really exaggerated response to something, or if it goes on for a long time, that's a breadcrumb, right? We talk about shadow alchemy. That is your invitation to get curious and say, what need do I think was going to be met that's no longer being met? Rather than thinking it has to look a certain way outside of me, that's our invitation to say, well, what need do I have and how can I meet it in another way? Right? So with the car, right? Perfect example. I love that. It's like, how do you get curious about, oh, it's because I'm worried about how other people are going to perceive me. Okay, well, what is it that you need in that perception? And how can you give that to yourself instead of waiting for someone outside of you to give that to you?
Absolutely. I love that. For somebody who is in that kind of bubble and they want to start breaking free and to start finding themselves and be more grounded, what are like a few things that you can recommend for someone to start applying today?
So many things. I think first and foremost, I would say for me, getting support was really, really helpful. Whether it was a therapist, I've seen multiple therapists, I've had coaches, I've had great friends who are very skilled at holding space and supporting. I find that everybody's a mirror outside of us, and those people who show up in support that are cheerleaders that can hold us and see us maybe in the times that we don't want to see ourselves, or who can offer that observation, they're able to see us from a lens that it's really hard to see ourselves. We all have obstruction points or blind spots that we can't necessarily see. So having someone outside of us to offer that mirror and a safe space, I think is really, really important, because especially in the US, the hyper individualistic culture is this idea that I have to do it all myself. So I think getting support, being willing to be supported, I think has been really huge. I think a couple other things I would say too is curiosity. I like to say that judgment and curiosity don't coexist very well. So oftentimes, and again, this goes back to that evolutionary urge to categorize, right? The easy example is if there was a predator jumping out of the woods, we have to make those snap judgments really quickly. Am I safe or am I in danger? And that tendency serves us very well. But if left unchecked, that tendency goes into overdrive. So then what ends up happening is, even in a situation where we don't actually need to judge safety versus danger, our brain is wired to do that. So we're constantly categorizing and judging things. Perfect example, when we think about emotions, feeling happy is good, that's a judgment. Feeling anxiety or feeling overwhelmed, that's bad, that's another judgment that we're putting on it. And if we're constantly sitting at that level of judgment that it's either good or bad how we're feeling, we miss so much of the data, the richness in what is that emotion actually trying to tell us. So I like to activate curiosity. Instead of, is it good or bad that I'm feeling this? What's making me feel this? When was the first time I felt this? What's the story that's being created as a result of this emotion? Because we know that 80%, over 80% of the communication that happens between our brain and our body comes from body to brain, not brain to body. So really our brain is just trying to interpret all of these signals that our body is giving us. So activating curiosity. And then one other one I would also say is definitely a lot of grace and compassion. We've been conditioned to operate this way. We are conditioned to think that everything that happens in our head is true. I think, therefore I am, really basing our identity on the thoughts that happen in our brain. We dismiss the body, we dismiss our heart, our intuition. And so giving ourselves grace and compassion, because I used to get frustrated. A joke I used to make was, I want patience and I want it now. And so when we think about that, this is a journey. So giving ourselves grace and compassion to know that we're making progress. We can take it step by step. We don't have to get to the finish line. In fact, there is no finish line, but really that compassion for ourselves to say, how I'm being, these stories, these limiting beliefs, these patterns of behavior, they have served me well in getting me to where I am. The fact that we might choose to want to let go of them to step into a different way of being, a more expanded version, a more authentic version of ourselves, it's like taking off a jacket. That jacket got us here. It kept us warm when we needed it. And now we want to figure out how to take the jacket off, but we don't need to shame ourselves or judge ourselves for having worn the jacket up to this point.
That was like so beautifully well said, because I think one of the biggest keys is giving yourself grace and compassion. If you can't give yourself grace and compassion, then nobody will. And you spend the most time with yourself every single day, so you might as well be kind to yourself. And that's such a huge one. I remember I used to beat myself up all the time. I used to be a ballet dancer when I was growing up. I don't look like them. I don't dance like them. I'm not tall like them. I'm not skinny like them. The list goes on and on and on. But nothing shifted until it shifted internally inside of me by saying, enough is enough. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I think that was also one of the biggest mindset shifts for myself is getting into the habit of saying that I am at the right place at the right time all the time. And I didn't believe it at first, but the more I repeated it, the more I started to believe it. Because then you meet someone here, you make a connection in the elevator, and you're like, wow, I really am at the right place at the right time.
Totally, totally. And I think on that comment of grace and compassion, I think that's really beautifully said. It all starts internally, right?
Mhm.
But I have met a lot of people, and I've been coaching for over 10 years, and I meet a lot of people who really struggle to give themselves grace and compassion. And one story that comes out time and time again is this fear of, well, I'll become complacent, right? I want to be motivated. I want to be compelled and take action towards my dreams. But if I start loving myself and giving myself grace and compassion, then I'll just become complacent and I won't do anything about it. And I think that's a really beautiful example of how our ego likes to trick us into maintaining the status quo. So if we grew up, you mentioned you have, parents who moved here first generation in the US. Oftentimes, I don't want to speak to your upbringing, but oftentimes those types of parents, and mine included, because I'm first generation American as well, those parents coming from a really beautiful place, a really good intention. They want us to be set up for success. They want us to succeed. And so they might critique us, right? They might give that feedback to say, this is how you fit in, this is how you excel, this is how you get ahead. And so we can internalize those stories as children that we're not good enough, we don't look the right way, we don't talk the right way. And not just our parents, but as you shared, kids around us can be pretty brutal. And so we're internalizing those stories. And so if grace and compassion is really hard to give to ourselves, again, that comes back to curiosity. Well, what makes it really difficult? Is it because we have that parental voice constantly in our head? Is it because we have some fear of complacency, of not being enough, whatever it is? And so the ego is very clever. And as we grow and learn new tools, fortunately, unfortunately, our ego is also learning those tools. And so I'm constantly dismantling new layers of ego. Again, it's a journey, it's not a destination, because my ego now tricks me. It's like, oh, that sounds logical, that sounds right. But it's just another limiting belief. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's just come up with a craftier disguise. And so I think if grace and compassion is difficult, know that you're not alone, right? For all of us, we all have those internalized beliefs. But like you said, Aneta, it's an inside out game. Nobody can love us more than we love ourselves. No one's going to give us that grace and compassion in a way that's going to unlock something inside of ourselves. It's an inside job that we have to do.
That's so beautiful. I really like how you re-emphasize that it's a journey, not a destination. Or I always like to say it's a journey, not a marathon. I've noticed that growing up, if I did things rushed, 9 times out of 10, it wasn't good. No matter what it was, whether it was studying for a test 5 minutes before the test. We've all done it at least once. Or picking out an outfit because for school really fast because one, you didn't want to do it the night before, or two, you didn't want to get out of bed when you know you should have, and now you're rushing everything. You probably put on two different pairs of socks and you're like, what is happening? So it's a journey. We should take our time. There's no need to rush, because if we truly start to believe and accept that we're at the right place at the right time, then we're never going to miss what's meant for us. I mean, I've been wanting to start my own podcast for a while, but I didn't exactly know how. And then I moved abroad and I just started it abroad. And if I started it earlier, things would be so much different, but it wasn't meant at that time. I could have probably given up a long time ago because things wouldn't go the way that I would expect. So just know that. Don't try to rush the process. I really love that.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful message, Aneta, that you bring up, especially in today's culture, because today's culture is all about rushing, instant gratification, fast results. I spent over a decade in the corporate sector, and everything is about quarterly results. How fast can we do this? How quickly can we move? And yeah, exactly to your point. Nothing is as good as it could be when it's rushed, when it's urgent. We're not at our best because our cortisol levels spike. We're activated in that fight or flight. We're constantly dysregulated, and that's not how we do our best thinking, our best creativity, our best innovation, our best relationship building. So giving ourselves permission to really slow down and say, I am right where I need to be. I love that.
Absolutely. This might be a little silly, but like, do you ever like watch those like quick little reels on like Instagram or Facebook? And it's like how to make a pie in a mug in the microwave, and versus actually just making a pie because like you don't want to take the time to do it. But which one's going to taste better? The one in the microwave that you make in 30 seconds with an egg and some flour, or the one that's going to take 2, 3 hours to put in the oven? When you start to put it into real life practices, it just makes you realize like, actually, it's going to taste better this way. Actually, the results will be better if I just take the time. When I used to be a hairstylist and I was in cosmetology school, my teacher would always say, comb twice, cut once.
Hmm.
Take your time, brush twice, and then cut once, because once you do it, then you can't reverse it. You can only build from there. So it's the same thing that applies to life: is think twice, do it once. I
Yeah,
love that.
I love that.
Awesome. Well, Carissa, this has been so wonderful to have you on today. I have one more question before we wrap things up. What does it mean for you to be nourished inside out?
Mm. I really just love that whole concept because to me, for me to be nourished inside out means I'm giving myself what I need. I'm attending to myself. I'm taking my power back, right? I'm living my truth. I'm living fully expressed. I'm trusting in my intuition, trusting the divine universal guidance, whatever we want to believe in outside of us. It's really about being in partnership. And something that I like to say is my job is not to control my circumstances or the outcome of anything. My job is to clean my vessel. So for me to be nourished inside out is really attending to, okay, what frustrations, what judgments, what limiting beliefs are coming up for me? How do I attend to those? How do I nurture the parts of me? We didn't talk much about internal family systems or parts work, but that's been a huge tool for me on my journey. Knowing that I can reparent, I can love those parts of me that didn't get the love that they wanted or needed. And so being nourished inside out really means seeing everything outside of me as a mirror. And so when something is mirrored that is uncomfortable, that's the invitation to get curious and go inward. So it's really about being in my power and enjoying the ride. There's no outcome, there's no destination that I'm trying to get to. I truly am enjoying the journey. And so I believe that we've all come down and incarnated in this plane to experience the full spectrum of the human experience. And so, how can I delight in, ooh, this is a new opportunity to grow? This is a new level of expansion, and really reframe those moments of discomfort. So, yeah, I would say being nourished inside out means I'm fully loving myself and being expressed as the most authentic, unique version of myself I can be.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And where can people stay in touch with you and support you in your work?
Yeah, I'm all over the internet, not hard to find. On Instagram, I'm at wild underscore moss underscore, or you can follow the startups I have. One is at Astra Puffs, my AI video game startup, and at healcollective.me is the healing community that I am a steward of. So, yeah, stay in touch. I would love to hear about your journey of being nourished inside out and how we can support each other.
Absolutely. I'll have all of that linked down in the show notes below so people can stay in touch. Thank you for joining us today, Carissa.
Thanks, Anita, for having me, and thanks for doing this beautiful work.